Okay. So just before I start on this coming Monday, please God, is my mother's yahrzeit. So definitely give her a thought. Simaronia, Bas Shlomo, Harav Shlomo. Actually, every share of this shares her, it's her share. So just continuing it as per my father's request. So every week I say her name before, but today, if everybody would just think of her name for a few minutes, or not even a few seconds, is a thing that should be learning in her schus. Um, for anyone who is interested in living in Johannesburg, at our girls' school, we have a beautiful program running in her schus, in her merit. It's the girls over 6 years. They will have gone through the entire Tanakh. They do this as an extracurricular activity. They get tested from about just before Purim until yesterday was the last test. And each class gets different things to learn, and they get very nice prizes. And the prize giving is on Monday at 9:45. Anybody here wants to watch? It's quite an impressive event, I think. Okay, so and then you also get to see our girls' school, which we have now been in for a full year, please God, the in a day or so. Okay, so we are in Perek Kuf test 119, and we are up to the letter test. And there's so much to say on the letter test. I was wondering if I should do two shiurim about tests instead of one, but Kufi test is going to take us a year, I think. And if I start making two shiurim per letter, then it'll take us 2 years. So just know that you're getting just a touch of the things that the Mefarshim say about the letter Tes. Every single one of the Mefarshim begins by saying that the letter Tes represents good, Taiv, and you'll see that as we go through these 8 psukim on the letter Tes. You'll see the whole idea of good and what is good and how do we get good. This is what David HaMelech is dealing with in these 8 psukim. So he begins, Pasuk Samachay 65. He begins by saying, Tov asisa im avdecha. You've been good to your servant Hashem kidvarecha. Hashem, just as you said. And the Metzudas comments over here on the words Taiv Asisa im Avdecha. He says, you've always done good. That's what David HaMelech is saying. Hashem, just as you said you would, you've always done good. And immediately people ask on what David says, and even more so on what the Metzudah says. David's life was not always good. Okay, it's like what does it mean when David says, Hashem, you've always done good, and why does the Metzudah stress that you've always done good? And it goes even further than that and says, Hashem kidvarecha, just like you say you always do good, and you always do good. If you learn Sefer Bereshis, you might remember that when it comes to Parshas Chayei Sarah, and it speaks about Sarah's life, it writes it very strangely that she was 127, and the Torah writes 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. And Rashi asks over there, why does it say years in between each thing, this expanded notation? And Rashi answers very famous wording. He says, Kulan shavin latova. All her years were equally good. And then we ask the exact same question that we just asked on about David HaMelech. Sarah's life was all equally good. There were some years that were terrible. She got kidnapped. She wanted children she didn't get. She had trouble with Hagar. We could ourselves list so many different things. And then there were some years that were great. She has Yitzchak. How can we say Kulan Shavin Latova, that they were all equally good? And so comes the Medrash Tehilim and explains to us that good doesn't mean, having a good year doesn't mean that it's pleasant, as we say, or fun or nice, but that good means making the best of, like, understanding that there has to be a best. There must be a reason of what Hashem wants me to achieve this year. And Sarah, even in her what we would label bad years, but David, even in what we would label his bad years, there was that he was able to understand that there was good involved in it. Um, Very often, the Medrash Tehillim explains to us that after a time after we've had difficulties, we're able to look back and see the good. Sometimes that happens, and we can understand the purpose of the negative. So, one of the biggest examples that come to my head, we had a friend who we were very close to, and she got married very nicely to a nice guy. And very soon after they got married, it was evident that he wasn't such a nice guy, and that this wasn't going to last. And so, in a very short time, she got divorced, and she was alone for a while, and then she remarried. The kind of person who she remarried, and she is so happy with, Baruch Hashem, for many years after, is someone who she would never, ever, ever have considered originally. And we often speak about it, she and I, that she often says she had to go through that. She had to marry the first person so that she would be able to marry the second person with whom she's very, very happy. Um, so that's when a person can go and look back and say, I see what I see what the purpose of that bad is. That's very similar to the level of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva, whatever happened in his life, he used to say, "Kol ma de avid Rahmana," whatever Hashem does, l'tayv avid. He did it for the good. And I always remember that line, because we had one storybook when Bathsheba was a baby, and it was a story of Rabbi Akiva and all the bad things that happened to him, and how each time he said, Kol Mada Avid Rahmana Latav Avid, and my mother read it to Bathsheba like 3 times a day, and so our whole family knows that sentence very, very, very well. But what is it telling us? Rabbi Akiva was saying, right now, I don't know what this is. I don't see the good in it, but I trust that there's a reason why it's going to be. It's going to be for a good purpose. And so, one of the examples of things is that Rabbi Akiva was sitting outside a little village, and he had a flame that was giving him light, and the wind came and blew out the flame. And Rabbi Akiva said, Kol ma Avid Rahman Tav Avid. Whatever happens, there must be a good reason. And a band of robbers went by, and they didn't see him because he didn't have a flame with lights. So it was so obvious, it was so easy to see why Hashem had made that seemingly negative thing happen for a good purpose. Then there's a higher madrega than that, because most of us don't get to see the good that comes out of the bad of our lives. Sometimes long into our lives we see it, but most times we don't. Most times we live our whole life, and that which we felt as bad, or whatever how we say it, we never see the good. We never understand it, and that's also okay. For a person to have the emunah to say, and this is very high emunah to say, this is good. I don't know how. I don't think I'll ever be able to understand how this is possibly good. This is much too big, much too hard for me to ever understand. But I trust, I believe that gam zu l'teva, that this itself is good. It's ununderstandable. And this is David HaMelech. David HaMelech says, Taiv asisa im avdecha. You always do good with your servant, just as you said you would. Okay, you said you would do good. So this is how he introduces the concept of Taiv. He continues and says, a pasuk that you might recognize very well. He says, Tuv ta'am vadas lamdeni. please teach me properly to understand. Kiva mitzvesecha he'emanti, because I trust your commandments. So this pasuk, why I say you might recognize it, is one of the psukim that is said right before we blow shofar. And I'm using what we're talking about now to understand why we say it right before we blow shofar. So no one really knows why we blow shofar. It simply says in the Torah that you have to blow shofar. That's all. We have lots and lots of different explanations for it. It's to wake us up. It's to make us do teshuvah. It's to show the coronation of a king. We can list. I think Reb Sadia Gaon lists like 10 reasons. There's so many reasons that we learn and study of why we blow shofar. But that's not the reason. The reason we blow shofar is because it says in the Torah that on that day you blow shofar. Full stop. Okay, without any understanding of it. And David HaMelech says, once a person has faith in everything Hashem does or tells us, it's also nice and it's also obligatory to try and understand a little bit, to always be at the level of knowing that our understanding is limited. However much I understand, I'll never understand. And in fact, one of the things that we all realize, that the more we learn and the more we do understand, the less we understand. We like realize how big it is, how much there is, and that we don't really understand anything. But we are obligated to try and understand. So if you remember right, the beginning of this perek, Kuf Yutes, the letter Aleph was all talking about emunah pshuta, simple belief, doing what Hashem wants us to do just because Hashem wants us to do it. And then we moved to the letter Beis, which represented bina, understanding. Because once you have that foundation of I do it because Hashem said so, we can't stop there. We have to move on to trying to understand a little. And here David is reiterating that, he's repeating that same idea. He says, Hashem, I believe in your mitzvahs. I absolutely do everything. I believe, I trust, I know that you're good. Okay, that you're good. Even when I don't understand it, I know that you're good. But you know what would be nice? Tuv ta'am vada aslam daini. It would be nice if you taught me a little bit, if you explained to me a little bit, if you helped me to understand a little bit, so that my foundation is trust, but the depth of everything I want to try and understand. I want to try and understand a little bit. David continues, and he says, Terem e'ene ani shogeg. And we want to understand what that word e'ene means, ani shogeg. I would make mistakes. Ve'ata imras hashamarti. But now I keep to every word. So let's understand this at a few different levels. Terem e'ene, we're going to go according to Rashi, who says that e'ene is learning, and he says terem e'ene, before I learnt, ani shogeg, I would make a lot of mistakes. Va'ata, and now that I started learning, imras hashamarti, I'm able to keep your word. So that seems like the simplest thing. Obviously, before you've learned anything, you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and once you learn, you're going to do better. That's the one level of understanding. Another level, another opinion of this is that the word e'ene, according to the Medrash Tehilim, e'ene means to suffer, to go through difficulties. And what David HaMelech is saying here is terem e'ene, before I was challenged, before I had difficulties, ani shogeg, I made mistakes. I didn't really understand anything. But now, imras hashamarti, since I've now gone through challenges, since I've now had difficulties, I understand imras hashamarti that I still keep what you say. And why is this? Chassidus explains to us that which we learn is supposed to change us as a person. So all our lives we go along and we learn and we can have these beautiful lectures and shiurim and that tell us that yeah, you're supposed to accept whatever and good is good, and even if it doesn't seem like it's good to you, it's still good. And we hear all these kind of things. When we are challenged, when we go through something hard and we still come out of it as a believer, that is, now I can say about myself, Imras Hashamarti, I really keep, I really believe I am a changed person as a result of going through something and coming out good with it. So this is what he's saying over here. Terem ene, before I went through any challenges, ani shogeg. It was a mistake of me. It was a cheek of me to tell you what you should feel, what you should believe. But vata, now that I've gone through things, imras hashamarti, I really know that I keep and I believe and I trust. Um, the commentaries also tell us that if we learn and it doesn't change us, doesn't make us into anything, that's a mistake. He says, Terem E'enan, before I learnt knowing what I was learning, and Ishegeg. And the commentaries tell us, or the more recent commentaries tell us, that the story of a Baal Shem Tov, the Baal Shem Tov, that someone came to him and said to him, Rebbe, I just went through Shas for the third time. It's my third time of going through Shas. And the Baal Shem Tov looked at him and said, and how many times did Shas go through you? And what he was expressing to his Talmud is not good enough to go through learning. The learning has to go through us, has to make an impression on us. Terem ene, before I realized that, ani shegeg, it was a mistake. But now that I've realized that learning has to change me, imras chashamarti, I'm able to keep your Torah, your mitzvahs properly. And the last comment that I want to make, which is completely different, but I think a very cute commentary, is that this is a place where a source that we get for learning out loud. Explains that the big difference between a library where people are studying and a base medrash where people are studying is the sounds, right? So in a library, if you raise your voice above a whisper, then people around you are glaring at you and telling you to shush. If you go into a base medrash, each person is learning louder than the person next to them, and there's a huge noise in the room. Say the commentaries that E'ene means actually to verbalize, to say the words out loud. It says terem in the beginning. E'ene, I thought whatever. I thought you have to learn quietly, and that was a mistake. Ani sheigeg, it was a mistake. But now, imras hashamarti, now I can hear what you're saying, and from here is the source that we learn Torah out loud. I don't know why every single thing today is reminding me of my mother, I guess because I said it's going to be in her. But my mother studied out loud. And most of our memories when we children talk about her is her sitting at the end of her bed and reading from Sefer Torah out loud, okay, on Shabbos morning. She even studied secular studies out loud. So she would learn psychology and she would read her textbooks out loud. The thing. This is sourced here in this line of Tehilim. Continues and says, Tevata umetiv. You Hashem are good, and you do good. Lamdeini chukecha, teach me your chukim, your statutes. And the Mephoshim explain what does it mean, Hashem, you good, and you do good. So the explanation I like the best comes from the Radak, who says, Taiv, you Hashem do good for us, always, whether or not we ask. Umetiv, and you do good for us when we ask. And he says this is the concept of davening. So many of us think that what do I need to daven for? Hashem knows exactly what I need. Hashem knows what I want. What am I asking for? And David HaMelech tells us. He says, we could leave Hashem to his own decision and his own plans. He'll be good to us, but if umativ, he'll be even better to us. He'll give us even more if we ask him, if we tell him what we want. Rabbi Tversky says it's the same as any parent. You give your children what they need, but when they ask you for something, then you consider it even more. You go through that. So that's his first introduction, the beginning introduction to what is good. Okay, what is it that's good? He now continues and he says, "Toflu alai sheker zaydim." They smear on me lies. Zaydim, these arrogant people. Ani b'cholev et pekudecha. But I follow your pekudim, your rules, b'cholev, with my whole heart. So he's saying, making a interesting statement over here. David HaMelech is saying there are people who are trying to say terrible things about me. There are people who are trying to spread bad things about me. And over here, the Metzudas comments on this, and he says they would look at David HaMelech and they would say, he appears righteous, but he's a real fake. Okay, he's not. He doesn't mean what he says. He looks like he's so holy, but he isn't nearly as holy as he appears. And he uses the word David HaMelech Zaydim. Zaydim means intentional. People who said this on purpose. So there's sometimes in our lives that people say things to us or make accusations about us that we know it's not true, but we also know that they don't mean what they said. They just said it. Okay, they just said things possibly without thinking, possibly without realizing. Whatever they didn't mean it with their whole insides. But these people, Zaydim, they thought out it was with intention. They were thinking of ways to harm and to hurt and to defame David HaMelech. And so David HaMelech is extremely, extremely hurt by it. He says, they say I'm a fake, and I'm telling you, B'chol leiv etzer pekudecha. How can they say I'm a fake? I serve you with my whole entire heart. I absolutely, absolutely I believe in you. And the most hurtful of things that are said against us is when it's something that's so completely untrue. That like really hurts. He's working so hard to be to be like completely sincere, and here come these people and say that he's a fake. So he says, this is really what hurts. What should be the reaction to that? So normally when we think we're being falsely accused, we get really upset and we give up. We get angry and we give up. And David HaMelech says, no. You know what I did when people made these false accusations against me? I started keeping your rules, being even more righteous than I was before. That was going to be my reaction to this. He continues, Pasuk Ayin, and he says, Tafash kechelev libam, their hearts are covered in fat. Ani teirascha sha'ashaiti, but my delight, that which I love, is your Torah. So this concept of being covered in fat. So it speaks about people who are very prosperous, and it's so obvious on them. You can see they healthy. We speak about them, that they have fat surrounding their hearts. We see their possessions, right? So they're driving the very best cars. They're living in the best houses. They're going on the fanciest holidays. They are surrounded in fat, and they have no time for Torah. But me, where do I get my pleasure from? I get my pleasure from study of Torah. So there are two things that make different people happy. So we have those people who their delight, their love is food, possessions, money, all those kind of physical things. And there's some people who get their joy from studying. And David HaMelech is saying over here, I get my joy, my fat, my everything from studying Torah. It says about, I'm almost sure it's Reb Mendel of Chernobyl, but I could be wrong on that. But it says that it was said about him once he was very, very fat, and said about him that he became fat from saying Yehi Shmei Rabbah. He got such pleasure, such joy of saying Yehi Shmei Rabbah that it actually made him fat, because it explains to us that things that we really enjoy and that give us pleasure actually make us fat. So I'm trying to be so great, right? Just enjoy everything. But I remember also that my father had a good friend who used to come to South Africa every year, and he was also a very fat man. And my father always said about him that it was just his heart, his big heart, that made him fat. He was just such a good, kind man, and his heart bigger and whatever. So this is what David HaMelech is expressing to us. We can be the kind of person who tafash kachelev libam, that our we fat from the good of the world, right, from the nice things in the world, or it could be shashati. I become delighted. I become fat from teirascha, from your Torah. Um, then he continues and he says a strange thing. He says, Tovli ki unesi. It is good for me that you afflicted me, lema'an elmad chukecha, so that I could learn your rules, learn your. So David HaMelech is saying that the reason that you afflicted me was so that I should do tshuva, I should get punished in this world, however you want to explain that, and um, we don't like that explanation at all. What does it mean? Hashem, you afflicted me so that I should, um, that should be, it should be good for me. So what does it mean so that it should be good for me? So Rashi says that the suffering that we have in this world, it actually changes us as a person, and it makes us aware of what's going on around us and how we need to behave with those around us. In Rabbi Tversky's book, he tells the story of a rich man who's driving home after a nice day of work where he's made so much money, and all of a sudden there's a crash, and he sees that somebody threw a rock at him. He stops his car and he gets out. He's like, "What are you thinking? Throwing rocks at my fancy car?" You know. And before he can finish his tirade, he sees there's a little boy sitting on the side of the road, and he says, "Sir, I needed you to stop. I'm pushing my brother in a wheelchair, and he fell out of the wheelchair, and people are just driving by without stopping, and so I threw the rock at you." So what? So Rabbi Tversky explains. He says, "What was the little boy trying to do? He wasn't trying to do bad. He was trying to make this man stop and look around the world, see what's going on." And he explains this pasuk of David HaMelech. He says, sometimes it's good for me to have a rock thrown at me, so that what? So that I look around the world and I take notice of what's going on. That's some level of understanding. Another opinion, who doesn't really agree with Rashi. He says that difficulties actually make us better people. That sometimes going through a challenge um, makes us change who we are, makes us change how we think. It makes us into a different kind of person. And this is what David HaMelech is saying. He's saying, Hashem, I'm not angry with you that you did things I didn't like, because I became David HaMelech because of the things the difficulties that you gave me. And then a third understanding of this um, is that when it says Tovli ki Unesi, it's good that you gave me these difficulties. Say the commentaries that being a Jew is not easy. It's difficult. And many times we have difficulties just by the fact that we're Jewish. And even at a very simple level, it costs more to be Jewish. We pay extra for food. We have to have fancy meals on Yontif and pay even more. We send our children to private schools and pay even more. There's all different kinds of restrictions. You can't be best friends with your neighbor and socialize with them because we're careful of those kind of things. And so it continues, and we can list lots and lots and lots of things that are difficult about being a Jew, right? In the olden days, the line always was "Schwer zu sein a Yid." It's difficult to be Jewish, and that's what David HaMelech says. He says, um, totally Kiyonesi. But you know what? In the end, I feel it's good for me. I wouldn't want anything else. I would want to always be this Jew. And I would want my challenges to be that I have money challenges, I have where I can live challenges, there is anti Semitism. Would I prefer to be a guy? No chance. Totally, it's good for me, Kiyonesi, that you challenged me Leman El Not Chukecha, so that I can learn, I can understand, I can be one of yours. We also know that good that came into the world, or even revelation of spiritual things in the world, came through a level of hardships. So we have one of the very first places we see that is with Avraham Avinu. Avraham went through 10 tests, 10 challenges, and then he became Avraham Avinu. He became the father of the Yidden. We have Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu went up to heaven. He spent 40, 40, and 40. What is that? 80, 120 days up in heaven. And the Medrash describes how hard it was for him there. Imagine he didn't eat for all that time, just one of the difficulties, the challenges that he faced. He survived miraculously, but it wasn't pleasant, wasn't nice. He didn't have an easy time up in heaven. But what was it for? So that he could bring down the Torah. And David HaMelech is saying, same thing with me. I also gone through all these difficulties, but so that what? So that I could be the father of Mashiach, and Mashiach should be revealed. And the letters test finish. He finishes one more pasuk. Tovli teras picha. I cherish, I love. It's good for me the Torah of your mouth. Ma'alfei zahav kesef, more than thousands of gold and silver. So take notice that in these 8 psukim, it says the word tov or tuv 5 times, which is like the 5 books of the Torah. David HaMelech says there's nothing more precious than the Torah. He also here speaks about money, because what we told about David HaMelech is that although he was so wealthy, king of Israel, had access to all money and any kinds of luxuries. It says about David HaMelech that he used just about no money for himself. He used money only to keep up his palace, his court, and then he saved everything and to pay his army. And he saved all the rest of the money for the building of the Beis HaMikdash, which he himself couldn't do, but he left everything behind so that it could be built. And I think that's where we stopped. I already went over. But I think that's where we'll stop today. So have a day and a good Shabbos.
Thank you, Yossi.
Thank you, Rifki. That was really good, and have a good Shabbos. And it looks cold in Joburg because you've got a nice warm jersey.
I've got a jersey on. Okay.